So I've been thinking, some of my deepest memories are attached to the movies that I'd watch as a kid. I mean, who hasn't been impacted by one of those classic animations that Disney has put out? And in my case, I would even say that actors like, for example, Jim Carrey, they marked an entire generation with their legendary characters that, honestly, just make me think, they don't make movies like those anymore, right? So for today's lesson, Ethan and I got together to discuss our favorite movies from our childhoods. We ended up talking about many of them, and it was a really great conversation for you to practice your English with because it was packed with advanced expressions. There were some fine recommendations of films in English, and it's much easier to internalize what you're learning when it is memorable. And without a doubt, we got into some highly nostalgic, memorable stuff today. So come and join us in this fun lesson, episode 423 of the Real Life English podcast. Ah, yeah.
Awesome, Izzy. So I've been really looking forward to getting to talk about some of these super nostalgic movies. It was such a throwback preparing for this lesson. And the first one I chose is called Matilda. And it's based on a beloved, like super whimsical story from Roald Dahl. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he wrote a bunch of children's books that are they're like classics, right? Like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The B.I.G., James and the Giant Peach, The Fantastic Mr. Fox. A lot of these have been made into movies as well. Have you read any of these books? Were you familiar with them when you were a kid?
I have not. You know, what's interesting about American children literature is that I am not familiar with practically anything. People talk about it, and it's like, I've heard of it, but I've never read it. I'm interested, because all of those are books, right? And when were they written?
Oh, I think that they're old, because I read them when I was a kid. So I was 30 years ago, but I think that they were already popular books from before that. So that's a good question. But I would say too, for parents or even just people who like kids books, those are really good ones to read. You could read them to your kids, or, you know, even if you're at a lower reading level, they could be great to practice. But of course, we're talking about movies. So my experience with Matilda is with the movie. And I think I watched it multiple times as a kid, but I have a very vivid memory of visiting my grandparents' house in Michigan, which is where my mom's parents were from. And we went to a video store. We rented a VHS, and I just remember with my cousins like sitting on the floor of the living room in my grandparents' house watching this movie. So it's about like this super brilliant, kind-hearted, a little bit precocious little girl who's unfortunately born into like this really oppressive, neglectful family. She has like horrible parents, horrible brother, but luckily she's a bookworm. She's like a really voracious appetite for learning new things, so she can kind of get lost in different stories. And she kind of, the big twist in the movie is that she discovers she has telekinetic powers. Do you know what kind of powers those are? Telekinetic?
Yeah, I think kinetic is about movement, right? The word kinetic's an adjective. So telekinetic, a tele is like from distance, like television is like sending images from distance. So telekinetic's like moving, the ability to move stuff without touching it from distance.
Yeah, it's the power of using the mind to be able to move things.
Actually, before we continue, I do have some questions here because you used some expressions, and one of them I'm not even sure. First, you said whimsical, that this movie is particularly whimsical. Like, what does that mean?
Usually we use that word when we're talking about something fantasy related, that it kind of gives you like these fairy vibes, maybe.
Oh yeah, okay. That's what I was thinking, like fairy vibes. With the sparks, right? And the colors.
Magic.
And all the magic. And you were talking about the character Matilda. You said that she is a bit of a bookworm. And she was a voracious reader. Was that it? Voracious learner, voracious reader?
Yeah, she has a voracious appetite, maybe you could say as well, for
okay, there you go. That's
learning.
the collocation. What does that mean?
We'll say to someone's a voracious reader. So voracious first means like you're super hungry, you're voracious. But we'll say this also figuratively to say that someone, they just can't learn enough. They love reading. They love, discovering new things. I think you also asked about bookworm. A bookworm is someone who loves to read. They love books.
Nice. Yeah, like you mentioned other ones like neglectful, but you know what? There's going to be lots of vocabulary here, lots of expressions, advanced expressions, not just talking about Matilda, but all the other movies, the ones I brought, I know that I may use some expressions. And for all of you guys listening and watching this right now, if you're not watching this on the Real Life app, you should, because it's the best place to actually watch these lessons. You get a full transcript of all the lessons. And when you're done watching the lessons, you can practice the vocabulary, the advanced expressions that we are using here, so you can remember them forever and actually use them in conversation. So you can unlock this lesson for free by clicking the link in the description below, or you can simply search for Real Life English on your favorite app store. So you mentioned that you would rent this movie, that you rented, or that you would rent multiple times, right? And I remember doing that a lot too. Even the movies that I have on my list, every time that I would see them like on the shelf, I'd be like, oh, I just want to watch it again.
Going to Blockbuster, that's a throwback.
Exactly. And this one has some Harry Potter vibes, right? Which is another movie that I'd rent a lot. It's not on my list for today, but it has that early Harry Potter vibes. And related to magic, because you were talking about it the other day, that this movie made you kind of believe in magic as a kid. In what sense? Like, how exactly did you believe in magic?
I think as like preparing about this, I was thinking about, why that was so captivating for me. I think it's because when you're a kid, you often can feel quite powerless, right? You're often forced to do things that you don't necessarily want to do. And so this movie felt very empowering because it's like you see many of the characters that are kids are kind of suffering from different things of being disempowered.
I mean, they are powerless in the movie, right?
Exactly. And Matilda's able to use her powers to, basically fight against bullies and so on. And so I think it just kind of gave hope in some sense, as a young child watching this. I was actually curious to ask you, what do you think you would have done as a kid if you had telekinetic powers? How would you have used them?
Oh man. Does that involve flying? Like, can you lift yourself up? Literally?
Things that she does like help someone else to fly. I don't know if she can fly herself though.
Maybe, there we go. Like I'd make other people fly. That would be an interesting thing to do.
With their consent.
With their consent. Or maybe not if they're bad, right?
They're bullies. Mine would be being able to teleport myself instantly. I think there's another movie, I believe it's called like Jumper or something like that the guy has this power as long as he's like seen a picture of the place. Yeah, I highly recommend this to, like, if you have kids or something, it's a great one to watch with them. But even if you're just an adult who likes kids movies, I think it's one that has many things that you'll appreciate even as an adult. And yeah, it's just such a heartwarming one. So definitely check it out.
Heartwarming. Nice. What is that?
Something you can literally think of saying warming your hearts, like it gives you good feelings inside.
I actually have one on my list that is particularly heartwarming, and I really want to talk about it, but that's not my first one, because my first one is The Road to El Dorado.
Oh,
Have you watched
nice.
that one?
I do. That was one I thought about as well when we were preparing for this lesson. So it's such a coincidence that you brought it up.
Nice. So this is probably the first story that I've seen that contains this theme that has become a favorite of mine. But before I actually talk about the theme of it, I'd like you to describe, just remembering the movie, how would you describe its overall theme?
Oh man. I mean, it's an adventure movie, I would say. I think it's two brothers or friends that they hear about the lost city of El Dorado. Like, Dorado in Spanish, it's for like golden, right? So it's like the lost city of gold. And they want to go there and get the gold and become rich and famous and so on.
So, yeah, it's an adventure movie. So that's one of the themes, and maybe it's the overarching, or is it overarching?
Overarching.
And then there's a lot of ancient history in it and mystical vibes as well. So it's kind of like Indiana Jones, but even more mystical, right? And more ancient, I would say. The stuff that they see. And this is the vibe that I'm talking about, because there's other movies that I'm really into that are just like this one, like Atlantis, what is it called? The Lost City of Atlantis,
Lost City.
that other animation. It's
Right.
also a Disney one. Yeah, but about The Road of El Dorado, it's basically about that you were saying. It's the story of two con men, guys who like to deceive people to get money, right, to just gain some sort of advantage over them. And they get hold of a map of the city of gold, El Dorado. So they eventually come to the Americas. I mean, Brazil. So they come here. I don't know. It's somewhere in the Americas, right?
Yeah, I think of it as Central America or Mexico or something like that, like the Aztecs or the Mayans. Somewhere
in there. And as soon as they get there, there's a song they sing that is just a total classic to me. At least I remember it to this day. And I don't even know how long it's been since I've watched this movie. But it's The Trail We Blaze. Do you know that one?
If I heard it, I bet it would be familiar. It's like
Yeah.
those Disney classic songs always stick with you.
So as soon as they arrive, they start singing and they like, start crossing or blazing this trail.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, what does that mean to blaze a trail or to be a trailblazer?
Right. So I think it's more used figuratively. In this case, it's literal. They are crossing the jungle and opening a trail that doesn't exist. So that's what trailblazing means, literally. But figuratively, it's the same, but you're being the first person to do something, exploring a territory that was previously unexplored, right? You could say.
Nice.
But this song, I was just, before recording this podcast with you, I was thinking about it. It's like, it is so great. And it kind of goes like this, like, changing legend into fact. We shall ride into history, turning myth into truth. We shall surely gaze on the sweet unfolding of an antique mystery. All will be revealed, dun, 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 on the trail we blaze.
That's so catchy.
But they say the unfolding of an antique mystery. It's a nice collocation, to unfold a mystery. What is that?
I mean, if you literally unfold something, it's like it's folded and you unfold it, right? But in this sense, it's like discover. Like discover also means that you're literally uncovering something, right? So it's very similar word in that sense. And antique mystery, did you say? It's like an antique is something really old. Like we have antique shops in the States where some people collect antiques. You might go to one of these shops to see what kind of very old things that they're selling.
Yeah, and it sounds so poetic. Anyway, so I just want to say that this movie was the first one that actually hooked me on pre-Columbian civilizations, like the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incas. And I finally got to go to Machu Picchu with the team, the RealLife team, last year? Yeah, it was last year, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, that was really...
It totally has the vibes of this movie, right?
Living the dream of that. And I can prove that I'm actually really into Incan culture. And you guys maybe have seen this in other podcasts. Like this is the pillowcase here. The couch, I have a charango, which is... And man, like for me, that trip was a dream come true. And I like other movies that are related to this too. You know, that was the beginning for me. But then other movies like National Treasure, that's not so old. I think I was already a teenager when that came out. That one with Nicolas Cage. I already mentioned Atlantis, The Lost Empire. And I remember having toys as well related to all this kind of stuff, like that ship from the Atlantis movie, that submarine. Anyway, so this is my first movie that I'd like to mention here. It's so like fundamental for me in my personality and my things I like to consume.
Yeah, it seems like it molded you into the person you are today in some sense, right?
Definitely.
I think a lot of that interest in history and culture and everything that later has made you into a model global citizen. The next one that I brought, I think in some sense it pulls a 180, but it also is animated. It's also Disney, and it's called a Goofy movie. I think this is one that it's more of a fringe Disney movie. Like, I don't think it even came out in movie theaters, but it's kind of like a cult following, at least in the United States, like a really popular animated Disney movie. This one has a place near and dear to my heart because it's with my favorite Disney character, which was Goofy. What does that mean anyway, the name of that character, Goofy?
Goofy.
If someone's goofy.
Right. If you're playing around, if you're being silly, it's being goofy, right?
I think with him too, it's like clumsiness. Like he's always, kind of hurting himself or getting into weird situations and stuff.
Breaking stuff without intending to.
Exactly. That kind of thing. And when I was growing up, one of my best friends, her dad, whenever I would come over, he'd be like, "Ethan, you old goof." And that even has some connected speech in it, right? It's like, you old becomes like yol. And it's kind of, you just use it as an emphasizer because I was a kid, right? But I don't know why he used that, why he called me that, like where that came from. I didn't really like it when I was a kid.
It's sweet, right? Like a goof. Goof is, it's like if I see a golden retriever, that's probably that old goof.
You could say a goofball. Yeah, they're very goofy dogs. That makes me think of another movie I loved when I was a kid called Air Bud, about a golden retriever that plays basketball.
I'm gonna have to say it then. That's my movie. That's the one I brought.
So there's a spoiler there. I guess we'll be getting to that one. Let me quickly share about Goofy movie, and then we can talk about another dog. So, yeah, this movie it's really nice. Like, kind of family movie because it's about how Goofy is wanting to improve his relationship with his teenage son, Max. Their relationship's kind of gotten estranged. And his idea to do this is to take him on a road trip to a place that they used to go when Max was little. So this is such a quintessential part of American culture, is this idea of going on a road trip, a father-son road trip. And of course, because it's Goofy, right, there's all these hilarious mishaps and hijinks that happen along the way. But at the end, it's really nice because they're able to reconcile their kind of like estranged relationship. And there's a very heartfelt message at the end. But I was curious, Izzy, this whole thing about a road trip, did you ever take any memorable road trips with either of your parents?
Yeah. Actually, I think I would take more road trips with cousins and uncles and aunts. In Brazil is a large country, right? So there's many places I've been to. But
it's not as common in Brazilian culture as in the States, right? This concept of going on a road trip.
Not exactly. Yeah, it's not exactly the same, right? Because like I think in the States, there's a whole idea of the stuff you bring. Maybe camping is a adjacent topic, right? Related to road tripping.
RVs, like recreational vehicles, are really big things that have like a bathroom and a bedroom and everything in them.
And I wanted to ask you a few questions here about some of the words you used. You mentioned that you said that Goofy's relationship with his son was a little bit estranged.
Yeah, if a relationship becomes estranged, it means that it's become distant. So he's lost the closeness that he had with his son when he was little. This is quite common too, I think, is when kids become teenagers, they don't have that draw to spend a lot of time with their parents like they did when they were little.
Such a nice movie because like it depicts reality, but in a way that's actually productive. Like if you're a parent or if you're a teenager, you can see the missed opportunities there. That like stuff they may be missing with your parents.
It's like I love that about a lot of kids movies, right? Is that you have there's layers to it that you don't get when you're a kid, that probably if you're a parent watching it with your kids, that you really appreciate. I even remember when we were kids with my brother, I remember in our living room watching the end of the movie on repeat, which is they go to this concert of this superstar that Max really loves. And they somehow end up on stage with him and they're doing like this choreographed dance. And so my brother and I were like watching it over and over again, trying to do the dance, which is an animated movie. So of course that's an impossible choreography, but it's good times, you know, good nice childhood memories. All right, Izzy. So is your next one, I already spoiled. Is that your second one?
Yeah, it's actually Air Bud. And this is more to honor a whole category of movies, of animal movies, right? I think everybody's seen at least one of these. And I'm not talking about stuff like Marley and Me. That's nice, but it's more for adults, I would say.
Too sad.
Yeah, it's too sad also. But I'm talking about the ones where the animal is supposed to talk, or if they don't talk, they do something kind of human, too human. You know, in this case, Air Bud, he plays all sorts of sports, right? The first one, it's basketball. That's why it's called Air Bud.
I think they made a lot of sequels too, maybe with
lots of
sports.
Sequels. So many sequels. I mean, there's 3 other sequels, and then there's Air Buddies, which is the puppies
or something.
Yeah, nice. And then there's like 5 or 6 more, and then it escalates quite quickly because they become superheroes, I think, with actual costumes. So it's kind of ridiculous. But the first ones are more believable, or at least
that
for a kid,
like
it's
Paw
like
Patrol. It's like
they went somewhere really crazy with it. But this is another one that I would say is really tied to my personality. Because I remember just pretending to be Air Bud or Bud myself when I was a kid, you know, like kind of crawling. And it was the movie that made me want to be a veterinarian. Now, I think half of all kids in the world at some point want to be a veterinarian. But I don't know if you ever wanted to. Did you have a dream job as a kid?
I did. I wanted to be an actor at some point. At some point I wanted to be do the voices in movies, probably because I watched so many movies like this.
That's
and
specific.
I wanted to be a video game developer, but then my brother told me I'd just be sitting in a dark room by myself staring at a computer all day. So that kind of, you know, put out that dream.
Nice. All artistic kind of roles there. But anyway, there's other movies like Beethoven and...
Oh yeah, that's a classic too, Beethoven.
Right. But one that is more obscure that I'd like to mention here, and I don't know if anyone listening to this heard of this. If you have, this is going to be special. Have you seen The Adventures of Chatran or Chatran? It's about a cat.
No, that doesn't ring any bells for me. You said it's obscure, so that means that not many people have heard about it, right?
Exactly. This is more underground, you could even say. The thing that was most memorable for me about this movie, I mean, besides the story and the whole imagery of animals, very cute animals, was the music. The music, to this day, I think it was just one of the most impactful things that whenever I listen to it, and I tried not to waste it to spoil it by listening to it too much. So every 2 years, 3 years, I go back to it, and I actually feel like crying, every time, because and it's so bittersweet, so poetic, and at the same time really wholesome.
It kind of reminds me of the background music in some Pokemon games. That it's like every city you would enter into had different background music,
Oh yeah, that is true. I think Pokemon would be another movie to mention here.
Reminds me of another one I watched many times when I was a kid called Homeward Bound. It's about 2 dogs and a cat that they get like lost and they have to find their way home. They like fight a mountain lion and everything. It's a great adventure pet movie. All these like childhood pet ones, like because I grew up with dogs and cats, and so I think I also felt very close to those ones, and it'd be more likely to cry and everything because it's like you think about them like your pets.
Exactly. It's heartwarming.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was a good one too, because I think the next one too, it has some more adult themes, but I love this one as a kid. So it's Mrs. Doubtfire, and it's with Robin Williams, rest in peace. His movies characterized though the 90s, like I think the childhood for a lot of kids that grew up in the 90s, like with movies like Jumanji, Aladdin, Hook, Flubber. That was kind of like more of a obscure one, but like a great one. Did you have a favorite Robin Williams movie when you were a kid?
Well, you mentioned a few already. Mr. Doubtfire would have to be the one, because it's just so remarkable, and I think it's because of the adult vibes and the message in it too. It feels more meaningful. There's something to it that as a kid you don't understand so much if you're not going through a situation that maybe feels like, in my case, my parents were already divorced at that point when I watched that movie, so I think it has that vibe that I would resonate with, I would say.
I was actually going to say it. For me, I think I liked it as a kid too because it hit close to home that my parents were separated for part of my childhood. And so in some sense, maybe it felt like it normalized that. Like it's okay because like, other kids also have parents that get separated or get divorced. Doesn't mean that there's necessarily like anything wrong with you. But that's the impactful thing, right? Is that it's Daniel, the main character, that he loses, his wife wants a divorce and he loses custody of his children. So he can't spend so much time for like quality time with them. And so he's really stuck in a rut. And he finds out that his wife, I mean, the premise for this is so great. His wife is hiring a nanny to help her to take care of the kids. A nanny being like someone who's a caretaker for young children. And so he creates this disguise of an elderly British woman and applies for the job, and she hires him. And so it's really beautiful because he embodies this whole new character, this whole new personality, being this really lovable older British woman, right? That's got all this charm too, coming from an American perspective, like, oh, she's British, like she's so charming. But he's able to get to know his kids on a whole new level that he couldn't as their father. Like also he didn't have the best relationship and kind of like took it for granted, right? So he gets to know them through a whole new light. And at the same time, he evolves as a person who becomes more mature and responsible than when he was married. But yeah, I was curious. I was going to ask you, like, for you in this movie, this Mrs. Doubtfire character, what stands out to you most about her? Is it like the costume, the accent, the backstory that she has?
It's so believable. Like I remember watching it as a kid, and it was hard for me to even understand what was going on there. From, okay, this is actually a guy who's just pretending to be this old lady, and now what I just see is the great acting. To be honest, and maybe I don't even say acting, but like the great embodiment of the character, and I'm just fascinated by it. Robin Williams. So sad he passed away, but man, all those characters, they were just so deep. I remember there's another movie that I like a lot. I mentioned already in a previous lesson. That is August Rush, and he plays.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, the the bad guy. Well, not exactly bad guy, but the villain. But there's depth to the character. You understand him, and he's so intense. He's always really intense. Robin Williams is, right? All his parts.
And he's totally one of those actors that could do, like, we came up with him doing comedies and everything, and we just saw him as someone who's really funny, but then he did these dramatic roles, like you talked about August Rush or Dead Poet Society, right? Where it's like really showing off, no, I'm not just a comedy actor. Like I'm a great actor. There's so many great scenes in this movie. Like I loved just revisiting it. I would love to watch it again. Like I definitely am going to have to do that. But one that came back to me is when he's cooking dinner for the first time for the kids. And it's just like, he completely screws it up. It's a complete disaster. Like he lights his chest on fire and just like burns all the food and everything. And then he like calls a delivery service, but he finds like a fancy restaurant that delivers to replace it. And they're just, his wife arrives home and she's just blown away because he has like this super fancy dinner all prepared. But
yeah, in the 90s, I think, I don't even know how many movies, but there were several with Robin Williams. And he reminds me of Jim Carrey, right? Because Jim Carrey...
Yeah. He did that same bridge, right? That's very difficult for some actors to break out of comedy into dramatic roles, right?
Which one do you prefer? Which one's your favorite?
That's a really hard choice. I think Robin Williams, maybe for some reason, it's maybe because of this role, even though I think I didn't know if you were familiar with this movie, but Liar Liar, I think was kind of a similar sort of vibes. Of
similar concept,
like the father that is kind of a screw up, right? And then ends up having to turn things around. Of
course, the story goes very differently. I think his kid makes a wish, right, like for him not to be able to lie.
For him not to be able to lie. And he's a lawyer, so...
Oh, that's awesome.
He has so much. Yeah, that's another great one.
Okay, so this was definitely not scripted. Well, you guys watching, listening, my next one is with Jim Carrey, my next movie here. And it's Bruce Almighty. Now, I know you were maybe a little bit older at that point, but I was... I think I was 10 when that came out.
I probably was a teenager at that point, but still was amazing. I think it stood out to me because it was one of Jennifer Aniston's first big roles after Friends.
It was.
So producer Chi said that he wrote to us that it's from 2003, so I probably was 13.
There you go. Yeah, still sort of childhood, right? And it did impact me. I took note of this one because out of all Jim Carrey movies, because there's several that I could mention here, but this one I think was the first one that I laughed so hard that I peed my pants. And I'm just being vulnerable here and saying that.
I love that transparency.
And I even know the scene that happened. I just wanted to play here for just a brief moment. I can tell you it's the scene where Bruce Nolan, the character, he's
oh my god, that's
forcing
such an amazing scene.
Yeah, he's making the Steve Carell's character do some weird sounds and saying some weird stuff.
I think that's a great scene because there's like a build up of just like making him do funnier and funnier things. So it's like you're not getting a break to catch your breath and everything to kind of release the reaction to the humor.
A potential scandal with the Buffalo PD surfaced today when the mayor
Yeah, and it keeps building up, right? Jim Carrey started to mess with the teleprompter.
In other news, the Prime Minister of Sweden visited Washington today, and my tiny little nipples went to France.
What did he just say?
It gets better and better, and I just couldn't stop crying. I just couldn't catch my breath, and it just happened. I peed my pants. I was 10, okay? So don't judge me.
Steve Carell is another one of those actors that did that same bridge from comedy into more dramatic roles, and he's like fantastic in both.
And I think this was the first movie that he did, and he was recognized as potentially a great comedy actor. Because before that, I don't think there were that many.
40-year-old Virgin, I think, was his first big one.
Well, that one, yeah.
Which is
anyway,
so absurd. Not a kids movie though.
Anyway, so Jim Carrey, man, there are other movies too that I could mention here. I'm not going to talk about them, but Liar Liar already said, The Truman Show,
The Mask,
Ace Ventura. Ace Ventura?
Oh yeah, Ace Ventura. That's such a classic.
Dumb and Number.
Yeah.
Do you know? There's also The Grinch, right? Do you know that he actually his face there when he did The Grinch, that was not makeup? that he actually made
Really?
that face. Have you seen that clip?
It's like CGI.
No, it was himself. Check it out.
You know, their parent says, you know who that is? That's the Grinch. And I go, I must find a way to stop Christmas from coming. You know, and their parents go, oh, I thought it was makeup.
So creepy.
Yeah. So talented, right? What is the Grinch, by the way? That's not. It's like a character, but it's also an expression. It became a cultural expression, right?
Yeah, because it's Dr. Seuss. I mean, first the story was very famous. Like we talked about Roald Dahl, and another one that like every American kid has read a lot of Dr. Seuss stories when they're coming up. And so the Grinch was a very popular one, obviously, at Christmas. And then we'll say that someone's a Grinch or someone's a Scrooge. That's another one that you hear. Like if someone's not into the Christmas spirit, the Scrooge comes from not a Christmas Story, A Christmas Carol. There's a movie called The Christmas Story. There's another one called The Christmas Carol, where it's like the old man being visited by 3 ghosts to help him to basically become a better person. And there's been like all these different parodies, like spin-offs of that story done because it's like a Christmas classic. That's a complete tangent, but you can use either of those terms, like a Grinch or a Scrooge, for someone who just does not get into the Christmas spirit.
Anyway, so we've been talking about all these movies here that marked our childhoods, and I just wanted to say to our viewers and listeners that we make many lessons with movies in series, and you can learn with them on our Real Life app as well, just like you can learn with these lessons with podcasts. Because again, we give you full transcripts, and you can do vocabulary practice once you're done watching the lessons. And I have a message here from one of our learners who praised our app for being particularly special in doing this.
All right, so the shout out goes to JP, and they say, it is one of the best apps to learn English in a different way. I recommend it 100%. You can talk for free with other people from other countries. It is incredible. The interface is spectacular and very easy to use, very intuitive. The developers went overboard with this app. If it is free, I can't imagine the premium version. Oh yeah, thanks so much, JP. And they said that the developers went overboard with this app. What does that mean if someone goes overboard?
They went above and beyond. They did fantastic work with it, and more than you would expect. They exceeded your expectations. And they said here that it is free, and they can't even imagine what the premium version has to offer, which is a lot. But again, if you can't afford it, you can use it for free, but you can still try the premium version, which has a lot more to offer. And Ethan, this was so much fun. I had many other movies here that we could cover. Maybe we can leave that for another lesson, for a part 2. But the ones we already covered were so cool. So remember, mine were The Road to El Dorado. I also talked about Air Bud, representing that whole category of animal movies. Jim Carrey with Bruce Almighty, but there's Liar Liar, Truman Show, and all that. What were your movies again?
Yeah, so I brought up Matilda and Roald Dahl, which there's also a lot of other movies you can check out with his stories that you'll surely enjoy if you like that one. A Goofy movie, which is a classic, and Mrs. Doubtfire. We talked a lot about Robin Williams movies in general too, so you might want to check out some of his other 90s movies if you haven't already.
And for all of you guys watching us on YouTube, leave a comment down below telling us what is some of your favorite movies that marked your childhood.
And if you're enjoying these lessons, a free way for you to support us so we can continue bringing you more great lessons like this is to, first off, subscribe to us here on YouTube and hit the bell down below so you don't miss a single new lesson. And also give us a like. Doing all this really helps YouTube to see that people are getting value out of these lessons so that more learners like you can discover them. And I'd say the same if you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other place where you can stream the audio podcast. Please leave us a 5-star review. Again, this is really helpful for us to get out to more learners. And finally, if you're not watching or listening to this on the Real Life English app, what are you waiting for? That's absolutely best experience so you can learn all the vocabulary from this lesson and never forget it, and so much more, as Izzy was talking about.
All right, Ethan, it was a pleasure doing this lesson with you. So many great memories with all these movies. And guys, remember, as we always say, that no matter what divides us, that which unites us is far greater. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
By now, you should already know that words in English, they often don't sound the way they look. That's why we call English a non-phonetic language. For example, the word Wednesday. If you read it the way it's spelled, it would sound like Wednesday. But in reality, it's just 2 syllables. The way you pronounce it is simply Wednesday. Wednesday. Same thing with the word business. It's not busyness, It's not business either, I've heard that too. It's business, 2 syllables, biz-ness. Sometimes it even gets shortened to simply biz, as in expression showbiz.